All right, good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
Let me give a thank you.
Your finger.
What happened to my fingers? Well, you know, there's a story there.
Sorry.
But first, let me thank our preachers and elders for giving me a chance to come up and talk to you guys tonight. I appreciate it. The strangest thing, and you won't believe it. You won't believe it. The strangest thing, though, I was boiling some eggs, and you know, and if the perfect boiled egg, if you boil it for 10 minutes, it's perfect. So 10 minutes, pulled it off the stove, and I was ready to pull them out. And just reached and pulled it out, and I couldn't believe it. It was the strangest thing. It burned my fingers. I could not believe it. Can you believe it? I mean, it's just the oddest thing. And you know, from this morning's lesson in 1 Peter chapter 4, Peter says, "Beloved, do not think it strange concerning the fiery trial which is to try you, as though some strange thing happened to you." Don't think it's strange when stuff that's supposed to happen happens. You know, and this was just a story for illustration purposes.
Oh, that ain't real.
It's not real. Not. It's just for illustration purposes. Nah, sorry. I use this hand to reach in. No, but you know, one of the things that really stood out for me this morning with Will's talk was this verse. As Christians, we know that the world is opposed to us. Why then do we think it's strange when persecutions come? It'd be like sticking your hand in boiling water and thinking it's strange when you get burned. Why would you think that? But we as Christians are shown and taught and encouraged, don't think that way. One of the other thoughts that really struck me from Will's lesson, and I'm not going to be the high energy Will here, okay? Even though I took about half a cup of sugar and a couple of B12 shots here before I came up, thinking maybe I could get the energy level up, but I'm not going to do that. But it's a prepared attitude. You know, having the right attitude toward trials and tribulations. That really struck me. Has anybody ever had a class where the teacher said, you know, during this class, not going to be any tests? If you have, boy, you're lucky. I don't think I've ever had a class where the teacher said not going to be any tests. Unless it was somebody auditing the class and the teacher said, you don't have to take it, but you're not getting a grade either. You know. But for the classes, there are going to be tests. And as you talk about tests, you know, what are tests? Well, they're part of learning, for one thing. And what is learning? It's part of growth, right? And then what's growth? Well, growth is part of our Christian call to grow. 1 Peter 2:2. You know, we'll go over there. And if you think you're going to get off without me asking any questions, you're in the wrong class, okay? But we'll go to 1 Peter 2:2. And he talks about, you know, as newborn babes desire the pure milk of the word, that you may grow thereby. That you may grow on the pure milk of the word. And then Ephesians also talks about growth. Ephesians 4:13. And he talks about, till we all come to the unity of the faith and of the knowledge of the Son of God. Now, there's the knowledge again. To a perfect man, to the measure of the stature of the fullness of Christ, that we should no longer be children, tossed to and fro, carried about with every wind of doctrine by the trickery of men, in the cunning craftiness of deceitful plotting. Growing so that we're no longer children, tossed about to every to and fro by every wind of doctrine. So, when you talk about trials and tribulations and classes and teaching, why are we tested?
See what we know.
See what we know? Okay. What else? Why else? This is the audience participation portion of the lesson here. What? So we can grow? Okay. So we can grow. There's lots of reasons why we're tested, and I want to hear them all.
It's a measure to see what we've accomplished from beginning to the next step.
Yes.
We do that with our kids. We put their little chart on to see how high they are, and then next year see how much they've grown physically, and it's our chart to measure by spiritually.
It's an encouragement. An encouragement when you get tested and you pass that test, and now you grow into the next, into the next, into the next. It's encouraging. What else?
But as a teacher, I expect my students to, when I test them, to be able to demonstrate that they have understood what's been taught.
Okay, understanding. It's really a show of understanding. Wow. Any woodworkers in here? Anybody remember shop? Way back when? Anybody make a display case in shop? I made a display case in shop. It was a display case, all right. What did I display? I displayed that the legs weren't even and how it would rock. I displayed how I didn't know how to use a router, around the edge. I displayed a lot of things with that case. But, it's the ones who got the lessons, because we all got the same lessons, but there were some who tested better than others. Man, they had some beautiful display cases. But I didn't pass that test. But yeah, so you can really exercise and strengthen the things that you've learned, those virtues, that knowledge, the examples. Do we always recognize when a test is given? Do we always have somebody that says, okay, you're getting ready to take a test, get your pad and paper out and get your pen?
They had pop tests and things like that. When you're not ready, pop one on you.
Pop test. And sometimes, do the tests always start with the words, get ready for a test? Nah. Sometimes they start with the words, let's cross over to the other side. In Mark, and I love this story, Jesus calming the sea. Mark chapter 4, starting in verse 35. Mark chapter 4, starting in verse So So Jesus had been talking to the disciples and telling them parables and explaining what those parables meant. And it says, on that same day when evening had come, he said to them, let's cross over to the other side. Pretty typical thing Jesus might say. Disciples probably saying, yeah, let's go to the other side. So when they had left the multitude, they took him along in the boat as he was, and other little boats were also with him. So nothing special. We'll hop in the boat. We're going to go to the other side. And a great windstorm arose, and the waves beat into the boat so that it was already filling. Now it's time to get your paper and pencil out. Here's the lesson. It's coming. So the boat's filling up. But he, Jesus, was in the stern, asleep on a pillow. And they awoke him and said to him, Teacher, do you not care that we're perishing? So from the standpoint of the disciples, here's a lesson. They're in a boat, they're going across the sea, and storm comes up. Expectation is the boat's filling up with water. When boats fill up with water, they sink. When boats sink, people have to get in the water. There's a big storm. We're out in the middle of this. I don't know if I can swim that far. We're probably going to drown. We're all going to die. Teacher, don't you care that we're perishing? Don't you care? Then he arose and rebuked the wind and said to the sea, Peace, be still. And the wind ceased, and there was a great calm. But he said to them, Why are you so fearful? How is it that you have no faith? And they feared exceedingly and said to one another, Who can this be that even the wind and the sea obey him? Who can this be? Test. You think that was a test for the disciples? Spending all this time with the Lord and him explaining these parables and seeing what he could do and what he had done, and then you're out there and he's just calmly asleep in the boat and you're tossed and you're soaking. Anybody been on the water when it's really been a storm or something? I've been under the water when it's a storm. And submarines. And when you're up on top, submarines do not like surface because they're round and they just rock. So whenever there's a storm, you want to get down as deep as you can and get away from it. So, but sometimes when the water's not deep enough, there you are on top and you've got to ride it out. But storms, the biggest boat in the world is too small when you're in the middle of a storm. That's just the way it is. It's too small. So here are the disciples with Jesus. Teacher, don't you care? You think Jesus cared? Do you think after this they had a little more faith? What do you think? They wondered who he was.
But his disciples walked with him and seen him with all signs and wonders of doing other things, healing people and everything else, but they wondered who he was. Vice versa, now the demons and stuff, they know exactly who he is. You know, they come to him and talk about, don't torment us before time and all these things. They knew exactly who he was. But these guys, the disciples, until they get more knowledge of who Jesus really is, which they did until Jesus crucified him. They didn't believe.
Yeah, they didn't believe. They had all these opportunities to learn, to grow, and they did grow. Yeah, they did grow. Sometimes we don't grow fast enough. Sometimes we don't. So when we talk about do we always know when a test is given? No, we don't always know. After the test is over, do we always know that, hey, that was a test? Do we whip out the answer key at the end and say, on question number 3, I said it was true, but it should have been false. And, question number 6, I said that the capital of France was Amsterdam, and I should have said it was Paris. Thank you. I was going to jump out there with Paris, but I wanted somebody else to say it first. But it was Paris. We have the answer key, but sometimes we don't have the answers, of course, during the test. But we always know, right, afterwards. There was a test. And looking back in hindsight, we say to ourselves, I wish I'd done better on that test. Or, yes, ma'am.
We do that, and I really appreciated what was this hard on the test and then, the temptation.
Yeah.
Because I think, sometimes we do that, and I've looked back and it's like, I was being tested because I had the opportunity to either do this or do that or go here or go there or not do this or not. And looking back, it's like, I had that was my choice, and I chose the wrong thing. And then there's times I said, I am so glad I did what I did because I was better. And so that really, I think we always do that to be alerted, and especially with me and when you're working with your kids and thinking that don't be tempted, and it's not necessarily the temptation, it's the testing as to whether you can choose the right answer or the wrong answer, and it's not a temptation.
It's a choice.
Yes.
Yep.
So, and I think we do kind of understand it, but at the same time, when you put it into your daily life, it's like, well, God just, no, He gave you a test, and you had to choose whether you were going to take the right answer or the wrong answer, and go from there.
Yep.
Now, it may have come a temptation to you, but at the same time, it wasn't a temptation.
Yeah, and where Jesus, tells Satan, it also says, thou shalt not put the Lord to the test, Lord your God to the test. And looking back, I wanted to look up what was he referring to? What was the reference? And back in Deuteronomy, there's the saying, you don't put the Lord to the test, which came out of Exodus. The children of Israel had been led out of Egypt. They were out there in the desert, and they didn't have any water. And they were crying out to Moses, Moses, why'd you bring us out here in the middle of the desert, no water? You brought us out here to kill us. We should have stayed in Egypt. And God talks to Moses and tells him what to do. I'm going to go to Exodus 7. Exodus chapter 7. Actually, Exodus chapter 17, I'm sorry. And I'm just going to read down the first 7 verses. Exodus 17. Then all the congregation of the children of Israel set out on their journey from the wilderness of Sin, according to the commandment of the Lord, and camped in Rephidim. But there was no water for the people to drink. Therefore the people contended with Moses and said, give us water, that we may drink. So Moses said to them, why do you contend with me? Why do you tempt the Lord? And the people thirsted there for water, and the people complained against Moses and said, "Why is it you've brought us up out of Egypt to kill us and our children and our livestock with thirst?" So Moses cried out to the Lord, saying, "What shall I do with this people? They are almost ready to stone me." Sounds like there was a couple of tests being administered here. The people, Moses. And the Lord said to Moses, "Go on before the people and take with you some of the elders of Israel. Also take in your hand your rod, which you struck the river, and go. Behold, I will stand before you there on the rock in Horeb, and you shall strike the rock, and water will come out of it, that the people may drink." And Moses did so in the sight of the elders of Israel. So he called the name of the place Massah and Meribah, because of the contention of the children of Israel, and because they tempted the Lord, saying, "Is the Lord among us or not? Is the Lord here or not?" You know, we're out here, we're about to die, and it always just gets me that how many times had God demonstrated that he was the God of everything? I mean, especially he's the God of water. What did he do to the Nile River? Changed to blood. What did he do to the sea? He parted it. They walked across not on muddy ground, on dry ground. And then when the Egyptian army came after him, what happened? Collapsed on them, and that was it. That was it for the greatest army on earth at the time. You know, he was the God of water. He brought them out of Israel. I brought them out of Egypt. And they were out there in the wilderness, and they're saying, "You brought us out here, and we don't have water?" They had the God of water right there with them. And so they tempted God, "Is the Lord among us or not?" See, here or not. We don't see him. We don't have any water. Where's God? That was an attitude. And as Will talked this morning, attitude is important when it comes to tests and how we respond to those tests. What kind of attitudes do we sometimes have during a test?
I know with some of my students, they have a defeatist type of attitude. They just, I can't do it. Fail, it makes them run and try. And sometimes we feel that way. We feel like the test is just too hard. I'm going to give up before I even try.
It's too hard. I'm going to give up.
More than I can handle.
What else?
Was try your best. You can only do your best, so just try your best and try and pass it. We'll be grateful for it. Is the way it goes.
And we will be graded for it.
Yeah.
What other kind of attitudes toward tests are out there?
I think sometimes we try to bargain with God. When something's going wrong, it's like, "Oh, dear God, if you just get me out of this, if you let I'll just do whatever." I think we see that sometimes we have a sick child or something, just let them in, and I promise that, and then we kind of forget that. So we kind of bargain with God to see.
Yep. Again?
Sometimes I think our attitude is thinking that we can provide for ourselves, and we don't have the attitude that God will provide. And if we don't have any water and we're thirsty, and we think, well, what can I do to get some more water? Or I put it on myself instead of leaving it on God to provide for me. I mean, that's one thing I know, that God does provide.
Yeah. I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. It's not that I can do some things through him. I can do a few things through him. I can do one or two things through him. No. I can do all things
And also,
through Christ who strengthens me.
The Lord does not test us beyond what we can take. He knows our limits.
And do our limits increase as our faith and our maturity increases? Yeah, they do. When it comes to tests, for children, there's tests that build them up in strength that you don't throw an adult test onto a child. It's like in college, when you get to that first math class, your first test is not in, hyperbolic calculus, because you're not there yet. You're working up to it. And I think that's one of the reasons we're called to grow in our maturity, grow in the Word, so that we can be ready for those greater trials. The parable of the three gentlemen who had the talents, and you had the one that had the 5 talents and the 2 talents and the 1 talent. And you think about the guy with the 5 talents. Do you think he started out handling 5 talents all the time? No. He probably grew into it. He probably liked the 1 talent guy for a while, and then he worked it and did this and demonstrated and learned and grew, and he grew into it. And so testing, as we talked about some of the reasons for testing, and some of you said, is so we can grow. It's so we can grow in our maturity, and it's so we can grow to help others grow. We can grow to help others grow. As we talk about the body and how the body is made up of many members, and many members have different talents. And all those different talents are working together in the body for the glory of God. And as our talents grow, we're helping others. Have you ever had your fingers burned? Doesn't it just hurt your whole body? Your fingers burning? It just seems like it just gets your whole body down just because your fingers are burned. And then after they heal up, your body's feeling pretty good, isn't it? Helping each other and strengthening each other, one of the reasons why we're tested, I think, is so we can grow together. I think Peter was right on cue when he told the people, again back in chapter 2, that the genuineness of your faith, being more precious than gold that perishes, though it is tested by fire, may be found to praise, honor, and glory at the revelation of Jesus Christ. And talking about how you need to greatly rejoice, but for a little while. The longest test, what's the longest test you've ever taken? I imagine nurses, y'all have taken some long tests. Life. It's still in progress. Haven't got to the final answer yet. But yeah, it's still in progress. But some of the tests, I can think of some of the, engineering and certification tests. Those things lasted for 8-10 hours. And I imagine some of y'all teachers and nurses and folk have had some tests that have tried you for a while. But here it says for a little while. Those tests, that lifetime test, even the lifetime test compared to eternity is such a little while. One of the examples that I try to show our kids, was trying to get him to understand as much as a human can understand, some little bit about eternity. And I said, okay, how long do you think you're going to live? 70 years, 80 years, 100 years. Let's say it's 100 years. Okay, let's get a piece of thread and let's pull off, about 10 feet of it. This is 100 years. Okay? Now, let's show eternity. Take this piece of thread and this spool of thread and you start unwinding it. Keep going. Get to the door. Keep going. Get to the next door. Keep going. Get to the next door. Keep going. And they kept going until they were outside in the yard. And I said, okay, keep pulling, keep pulling, keep pulling until the thread's gone. And I said, that's not even a measure of eternity. Now bring it back in here. And they got the ball of thread and they got this 10-foot piece. I said, here's your life. Here's not even a portion of eternity. That's a concept that I really want you to understand. How what's in your life doesn't measure up to what's going to be in eternity. And so those lessons, the teaching, the attitude, I think it's important. And Will, I really appreciated your lesson this morning. I thought that was good. That's all my questions for you right now. As I said, even with a half a cup of sugar and 2 B12 shots, I can't match up with Will, so we'll stick with that. If anybody has any requests or needs that they want to have made known, please make sure that you do that as we sing the final closing song, and then we'll have someone lead us in prayer. Okay?